So this week we're going to talk about moral arguments. And moral arguments are going to look like any argument that we've studied this semester, in that it's going to be a series of premises, and each premise is going to be one statement, so one true or false claim, and it's going to infer a conclusion that is also a true or false claim. And if the argument is deductive and valid, then the premises, if true, will infer a necessarily true conclusion. And if it's sound, all those claims will be true. But the thing I want to look at today is what constitutes a moral argument. And there are three things in a moral argument. One is going to be a general moral principle. And this is what is really controversial in ethics, is what is that general moral principle? And maybe there's even more than one. But it describes the nature of right and wrong. So it gives us a basis for judging. But it doesn't make any specific judgments itself. It's just about what makes an act, not any specific act, but any act, right or wrong. Accompanying a general moral principle has to be facts, about the specific case that you're analyzing. Okay. And these are not moral claims. They are just statements that are true or false, and they have to do with the world. Okay. And then the last thing, and this will always be your conclusion, is what we would call a singular moral judgment. And so that is specific to the case that you're analyzing, and it will weigh in on the specific action that is being questioned. Okay, so let's see how this plays out. Let's suppose that I am vegetarian, and I think that being vegetarian is the right thing to do. And let's say that I think that eating meat is immoral. Okay, so here's some ultimately the singular moral judgment, the claim that I'm trying to support as my conclusion, is that eating meat is wrong. Okay, that is a specific claim, and it's particular to the case that I'm analyzing. Okay, now how would I support that singular moral judgment? This is a singular moral judgment. Okay. Well, some things that make me think that eating meat is wrong. Let's say that the slaughter of animals causes suffering. And I think that that is just a fact. It's indisputable. I suppose we could challenge it, and especially if depending how the slaughter is carried out, maybe there's some way to do it in a way that doesn't cause suffering. But I think that this would be a hard claim to dispute. But it doesn't make a moral claim. Okay, it just says the slaughter of animals causes suffering. Okay, and let's suppose that I also think that being vegetarian is not pain inducing. Okay, so it doesn't cause pain to animals. I think that that's just a fact, And let's say that for the human being, it's not a pain inducing diet. Okay, so it's not really causing suffering to animals or the vegetarian. Okay. But that's also not like a moral claim. It's just a factual claim. Okay. It's just saying something about the world. Okay. But so I need something additionally, in addition to these facts. Okay. I'm just going to label these facts. It doesn't mean that they're actually facts. It just means that they're claims about the world that are true or false. And if they're true, they're facts. If they're not true, then we would need to make an argument for them being false. But they're just claims about the world. Okay, but we need something to some kind of moral claim that ties in with these facts to bring us to this conclusion that eating meat is wrong. Because you might agree that being vegetarian is not pain-inducing. You might agree that the slaughter of animals causes suffering, but that doesn't necessarily mean that eating meat is wrong. Maybe there's nothing wrong with causing suffering in the world. Okay, so given that this focus on pain and suffering, okay, it seems to me that what's really going on here is that I feel some kind of moral duty to minimize suffering in the world. Okay, and that would be a general moral principle. So I have, well, let's see, not even just let's say that humans, okay, we're going to make it super general. Humans have a moral duty to reduce suffering, or maybe beyond reduce, minimize suffering. Okay, so it's not just about like making it so there's less suffering, okay, but act in a way that causes the least amount of suffering possible. Okay, so humans have a moral duty to minimize suffering in the world. Okay, well, now this is what we would call a general moral principle, because it's not specific to eating meat. It also gives me good reason not to bully someone. It gives me good reason to why I should do the dishes after dinner if it would help out my family. It gives me good reason to stop my car if somebody is having a medical crisis on the side of the road and try to get them some help. It gives me all sorts of, it directs me to act in a variety of ways because it's general. Okay. So it's not specific to eating meat or diet at all. Okay, so it's a very general moral principle that gives me all sorts of can help me draw all sorts of conclusions. Okay, but the case that I'm specifically analyzing here is diet. All right. Okay, so humans have a moral duty to minimize suffering in the world. Being vegetarian is not pain-inducing, so by switching my diet, I'm not causing more pain. Like I'm not causing myself to be malnourished, for instance. Okay, so I'm not introducing pain in the world. Okay, that's important. And the slaughter of animals causes suffering. So by turning away from that, I'm not increasing pain in the world, given premise 2, but I am reducing suffering in the world. Okay, and so if that's my moral duty to minimize suffering in the world, it seems that eating meat is wrong because there's an alternative. That's what premise 2 tells me, and eating meat is causing there to be suffering in the world that is apparently unnecessary. Okay, given premise 2. So this has all the components of a moral argument. Okay, it has just some claims that are not very contentious. Then they're not moral, but they just are about the world. Okay, but then they also include this general moral principle. All right, and when we combine them all, the conclusion seems to follow. All right, so then when we evaluate this argument, I think that people who do not think that eating meat is wrong, they might question premise 2. Sometimes you hear the argument that there's iron deficiencies and a number of health problems that come without including meat in a diet. So they might think that being vegetarian actually induces pain, okay, for the vegetarian themselves. And then there might be some question about premise 3. Okay, the slaughter of animals causes suffering. Maybe there are ways of carrying out the slaughter of animals that do not cause suffering. So there might be some questions about these just kind of basic facts, all right? But maybe where the heart of the controversy lies is with this general moral principle. Maybe we don't have a duty to minimize suffering in the world. I mean, maybe we have other kinds of duties, okay, that don't have to do with minimizing suffering. And there are times when we can add suffering to the world, but not act wrongly. You know, there's whole moral theories about this, that the consequences of an act don't make the act right or wrong. Rather, actions are intrinsically right or wrong. So for instance, someone here who believes this moral principle might think that, well, there are times when lying to someone is the right thing to do because, let's say, it's a white lie and it minimizes suffering in the world. Well, someone might oppose that and say, no, lying is always wrong. It disrespects people, and it's always wrong, which would mean that this general moral principle cannot be correct. Okay, that is not just about the consequences and minimizing suffering. Some acts are intrinsically right or wrong. Maybe lying is always wrong. Maybe eating meat is always morally permissible. Some people invoke a kind of natural law theory. It says, well, if you look at our teeth and, you realize that human beings have evolved to eat meat, okay? And so it's perfectly natural to eat meat, and what's natural is right and what's unnatural is wrong. Eating meat is perfectly natural, so there's nothing wrong with it. That would be invoking a different, an opposing general moral principle. But the key is that any moral argument is going to have these three components to them. You need to ultimately arrive at a judgment. You need some just facts about the world, non-moral claims that help bring about that judgment. But you also need a moral vision, all right? A general moral vision about what makes an act right or wrong. And if you take any kind of ethics class, you spend, most of your time considering different possible moral theories which propose different kinds of general moral principles. And they're all controversial and all need to be defended with argument.